Welcome, my friends, to Inside the Minds of Authors. I'm DC Gomez, and I'm thrilled you're joining me today for a fun conversation with a passionate author. We're kicking off the program, like it's our tradition, with a short reading from the feature book. I hope you guys enjoy it. Let's get started.
Hi, my name is Angela Van Breemen, and I'm the author of a debut novel called Past Life's Revenge. I'm going to be reading from chapter 12, and I'll just give you a little bit of background of what's transpired in the story so far. David Harris is a young lawyer who has had debilitating nightmares his entire life. Really, no matter what he's done, no matter who he's gone to, it's been very frustrating because he hasn't been able to get an explanation as to why he's having these dreams that are so realistic. They could be real from his point of view, but he still believes, of course, that they're dreams. He meets by chance, or perhaps it's really fate, a young lady by the name of Emma Jackson, who is a psychic. And when she begins to share some of these visions during a daydream, he is convinced by Emma that perhaps he might want to consider a past life regression. And so, after several sessions, they begin to discover what may have actually happened to him in a previous life, and also might be an explanation and perhaps resolution as to why he has these terrible dreams. So here we go, chapter 12. It's called George Samuel Larson. David opened his eyes. A nagging feeling told him that something of extreme importance had occurred, but he could not quite grasp what it was. He was certain he had seen the eyes during the session. He heard Anna say, "Wake up, David," but he was too weak and groggy to answer right away. He saw Anna's worried eyes and said, "Something happened, didn't it?" "Yes, we had a breakthrough, but you gave us a scare." "What happened?" "You relived the death of your former life. It was traumatic, and I had trouble bringing you out of the trance." "Did we learn anything worthwhile?" "David, you were named George Larson, and either worked or lived here in New Elgin in your previous life." She paused. "You died at the age of 32 on December 15th, 1993. David stared ahead and said, "So you really think my dreams are not just nightmares, but actual memories from a past life?" "Yes, I do." Her expression was thoughtful. "It's unusual, though." "What is?" asked Emma. "Normally, souls don't reincarnate so soon after death, unless David swallowed the lump forming in his throat. The trauma was so great, the soul needed to return sooner." David interrupted. "I was murdered, wasn't I?" "Yes, I think so. I'll review the recording and prepare a transcript for you, but my impression is that you saw and may even have known your killer." "This is a lot to process." "I'd recommend you review the transcripts and then we can schedule another session." "I wonder." David looked back and forth between Anna and Emma, his face pinched with concern. "Yes?" asked Anna. "If this is all real, and I was murdered 30 years ago, there's a good chance the killer could still be alive." "True," said Anna, "and still be relatively young, possibly still in his 50s, maybe even early 60s. "What are you thinking?" asked Emma. "Hang on a sec." David grabbed his iPhone and typed in his query. "Just found this website called Canada Cold Cases. It's a database of unsolved murders and disappearances." "Is there a search tool?" asked Emma, unable to hide her excitement. "Yep." Typing in George Larson. "Oh my God, I've got a hit." His face turned white. He turned the display around for both Anna and Emma to read. Canada Cold Cases, George Samuel Larson, updated March 15th, 2023. On the evening of Wednesday, December 15th, 1993, between the hours of 6 and 7, 32-year-old Officer George Samuel Larson of the New Elgin Police Service was shot in the head. He was off duty at the time and was killed en route to an appointment with his lawyer Liam Foster of the law firm Foster and Harris. His murder is believed to be a completely random act of violence. In the almost 30 years since his death, there have been no suspects, and his case remains unsolved. His sister, Sarah Marie Larson, says George's untimely death led to my mother's suicide in 1994. The killer not only took my brother's life, but also my mother's. If you have any information relating to this case, please contact Detective Brian Grant of the New Elgin Police Service. What? Isn't that the name of your law firm? Emma said with a mixture of awe and fear. Exactly. David's complexion remained pasty white. They mentioned Liam Foster. He's my uncle. This is bizarre. Emma's face had lost its color. It's all so tragic. Sarah lost her mom too, said Anna. Look, there's a picture of George, said Emma, pointing at the screen. Can you enlarge it? David expanded the image with his right index finger and thumb. His face blanched even further. He looks familiar. It's not unusual for you to recognize your former self, said Anna. Odd. Samuel's my middle name, too. His voice was toneless.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Inside the Minds of Authors. I'm so excited you guys are joining us for another amazing conversation. I have a fabulous author with us today, so I can't wait to get started. If you're new to the podcast, go ahead and subscribe. You do not want to miss a single episode. So we have incredible authors with fabulous books each week for you, so you do not want to miss out. So let's get started. Hello, Miss Angela. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you doing today?
I am doing amazing. I love that reading. I have questions. I'm going, ooh. So let's get started.
Sure, let's.
Where did this story come from? And give us the premise. What is it about?
Well, basically, the story is about a young man who's had terrible nightmares his entire life. He meets a young psychic named Emma Jackson who suggests that maybe the reason for these dreams is really a memory. And she suggests that he undergo a past life regression from her friend Anna Tungsten. And so, after undergoing this past life regression, he learns that he was indeed murdered in his most recent life and that he reincarnated so soon that the murderer is likely still alive. And because of Anna and Emma had hoped that David would have this sense of release and closure, and that the reason for the past life regression was really just to find an explanation for the dreams. But being a young lawyer and having a strong sense of justice, he can't let go of the idea that his killer is actually still alive. And as the book unfolds, he learns that that is actually the case, and he cannot rest until he finds closure and the way of actually apprehending this murderer from striking again.
Where did this idea come from? Because I'm like, wow, that's in depth.
Well, I have to admit, I've had this idea in my mind for an awfully long time. I've been writing poetry since a very early age. And I guess in my early 20s, I decided that I was going to write a book. And I started it about a third of the way through. Life got busy. It's not that I lost interest because I thought it was an interesting story, but I met my husband. It just, life got busy with a career, and I put that manuscript aside. It was a third written. And I was inspired actually by my husband just about a year and a half ago. He just published his first book called Outfoxed. His name's Peter Ponsa. And I thought, you know something? I always felt like there was unfinished business with this half finished or a third finished manuscript. And while I was cleaning out my desk in December of 2022, I came across it again. I always saved it. The page is curled up. It's yellow now. It's like it looks in really bad shape. And I told myself, rather than just put it back in the drawer, why don't I just at least look at it? Why don't I just at least read it? And I started to read it and I thought, there's a lot I want to change with kind of words I used, 35, 40 years ago. There's a lot I want to change, but I liked the idea of the story. And so I decided I'm going to rewrite it. So in December of 2022, between Christmas and New Year's, I started rewriting it. And I kept this project on until the end of May of 2023, and I had my first draft. And so I took the suggestion, which a lot of people say, once you have your draft done, put it aside, don't look at it for a while. And the timing was perfect because I'll just quickly mention I'm also a singer. And so I went into the studio to record an album. So it was a perfect cooling off period for my book. I actually really didn't start looking at it again until December of this past year. And at that point, had already had a few beta readers look at my book. And so I took all their wonderful advice under consideration and also did a really hard edit of my own work because I'd had that time frame. I had enough disassociation from it so I could look at it objectively. And so I worked on that until March of this year with the edits, and then I had it ready to go with one final editor who went through the work, and I did an early release or a pre-release, but officially it was released on July 9th. So yeah, that's a bit of the story or the journey that I went on. It was a little bit long in the making, but once I got to it, it was like I just was on fire. There were days I wrote 5,600 words. And my husband would come in the room and say, "Did you even remember to eat today?" Because no, I hadn't, right? So, but I've already started the second book because I realized that this story has so much potential to continue on. So, in the series, it's going to be a series. The second book is about a third of the way through. And Emma and David are teaming up together to solve cold cases using the paranormal. So that's sort of the premise for the series. That's how it got started.
Ooh, that is so interesting. I'm really excited that you went back, that you decided to give this a chance, that you got inspired to say, you know what? Why not? Let's take a look at it. So that is awesome. So once you decided to come back, what genre did you decided to place the series in?
Well, it just seemed natural. I mean, I grew up surrounded by psychics and mediums. So the idea of reincarnation and the paranormal, I'm very comfortable with that. And so I think that's why conceiving the idea was not all that difficult. And over the years, it's just strengthened that conviction and reincarnation and past lives and group souls reincarnating together. The idea is that you learn from one life, but isn't it a marvelous thing if you can continue learning from each other and getting it right finally? So the soul gets an opportunity to continue to evolve. So having those ideas, it originated in a natural way for me because I was exposed to it from such an early age.
You mentioned you were a poet. How much
Yes.
of your poet's background has translated into writing this novel, or not at all?
Well, it did. And it's an interesting question. And I've thought about that quite a bit. So I'm very happy you asked. You see, when I'm writing poetry, I feel like it's painting with words, and you choose a few succinct words, and you can convey so much how you're feeling or your observations of the natural world, which I often focus on, or events that are happening in the world. And so I found that translating that to prose was an interesting exercise. And I know a lot of authors who will write 80, 90, 100,000 word manuscript and then they have to cut back. It was the reverse for me because what happened was I was so economical in the use of my words that I found that when I was doing my hard edit in December of this past year, I was finding that what I actually had to do was add more in to make it fuller and to make my characters real and to make the situation more believable. So I had to actually add in more. So that was a bit of a challenge switching from poetry to writing a novel. I found that I had to, although I still believe in being economical with the use of your words, I realized that I get to use more words. So that was a fun challenge.
You got to flesh out characters and give more expressions that
Yes.
sometimes, like you mentioned, poetry is very economical. You don't have that much space in there. So I love the fact that you were able just to switch gears and say, okay, I need to flesh this out some more.
Yes. Yeah.
When it comes to your singing, has
Mhm.
that inspired your characters as well? Do you see your songs translating into your books?
I don't see my songs translating into buying books necessarily, but the way it seems to work for me is music and poetry and prose to me are closely related. So, although it may not be a specific song that influences my writing, there's a certain cadence and rhythm and pattern that I find that you will find in music, you will find in poetry, and you will actually find it in prose as well. And I think that if you had that rhythm and that cadence with your words, then you're in the zone. And I believe then that the reader will be too, because they will follow that musical pattern in the writing, in the music, in the poetry, in the same way that you intended when you wrote it. So I think that will keep the reader engaged and interested.
You're very intentional with your process, which is really fascinating because you can feel it, not just as you're writing it, but as you're creating these pieces, as you're getting ready to start your second book. Where are you finding inspiration for that? Is this real cold cases, or are you just kind of letting the universe come to you?
Well, I would say the universe comes to me. However, often if I hear a piece on the news of a situation, a cold case, it kind of spurs the imagination. It sort of gets you thinking in a certain direction. So I think it's impossible to say it's any one thing. I think just living life and being exposed to today's society, you automatically get influenced, whether you realize it or not. And then it may just be percolating in your subconscious. And then all of a sudden it comes out as something new, but the spark of it may have originated from something you heard on the news or just a thought, just something you read even. So I think it's a little bit of all of it. I think it's hard to separate it that clearly. I think that it becomes a sort of an organic a system on its own.
That is such a great way to say it and kind of letting inspiration come to you from many different places.
Mhm.
As a creator, what do you read on a normal basis? Or do you read the same things that you write?
I read a wide range of books, and surprisingly, most of them don't have anything to do with the paranormal, which is curious. I love reading Baldacci and Patterson, and I also really like Daniel Silva's books. They have a political leaning to them, but he always takes current events and weaves them into a story, which I really, really admire. So I read a lot of different things, but not a lot of it is paranormal. And I don't know why that is. Maybe for me, that's such a natural thing. I don't read spooky stories. And yet some people have told me my story is a little dark and twisty. And it's funny, I don't think of it that way because I just think of reincarnation as such a natural concept that for me, it's not spooky. And I found it interesting. One of the people who had reviewed my book had mentioned that I presented reincarnation in such a natural way that they almost believed it. So I thought that was an interesting statement because it's so natural to me. Although, if I come across a real life situation, I'll read that because I find that's very interesting and it sort of substantiates what I believe in. But I don't really read spooky books. I think I'd be too spooked out to read them myself. And I know that seems like a strange paradox, but that's a little bit about how I am.
I completely understand because I don't mind writing supernatural. I tend not to watch movies myself. So I completely
Ah,
understand. I'm
you
like, yes,
understand.
yes, completely makes
Perhaps
sense.
I wonder if it's because we realize that it's not necessarily fictional to us. Maybe that's what it is. And that we know that there's a possibility of some truth in it. And so therefore it becomes uncomfortable. I don't know.
It's safer to keep it at a distance sometimes. I'm like,
Yes.
I write
Yes.
about it. I don't want it in the house. So let's
And
separate it.
I hear you. That makes sense to me.
So, but as you've been in this journey of writing your book again and putting it all out there, what are some of the lessons you have learned that you were not expecting?
What I wasn't expecting was not the writing process because I was pretty comfortable with that. And I had observed my husband's journey with writing, and we have a lot of friends who are authors. So that part didn't surprise me, but the publishing aspect of it surprised me. The ins and outs with Amazon, the ins and outs with Ingram Spark, which is where I published the book. So some of that and how they they work or don't work well together, stuff like that. I found that rather challenging and interesting, but I know better for the future. So I've gone through that learning curve. And so that's interesting. From a formatting point of view, I'm pretty savvy with the computer, and yet still I found some things that a little frustrating with some of the layout to get it ready for print. But overall, that probably is the main challenging thing, just that learning curve. That was important to understand that industry better. So
And those are kind of things, the more you do, the faster you get and the better. So those are fun things to pick up.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And I do a lot of graphics artwork, so I enjoy designing the cover as well. And I love that kind of work. And so those parts of it were fun, and understanding the bleeds and everything, I was comfortable with that. So that part was good. But it was just the actual structure of what each particular service required that was a bit of a learning curve. It's different for this one. No, they do it this way, and that kind of thing. So
I completely understand. Madam, what advice would you give an up and coming author who's getting ready to start or had a manuscript in the background and wants to pick it back up? What would you tell them?
I would say that it's never too late. Like, I waited a long time to write this story, and sometimes I wonder, should I have tried to write it sooner? But I think that my life's experiences influenced how I wrote that book today. So, no matter what level your manuscript is at, don't throw anything you write away. Keep everything, save it. And I think that's an important lesson. And I'm so glad that I followed my own advice on that, that I kept that manuscript. Because there were a number of times when I thought, oh, you know, I'm not a writer. I do poems. I don't think I'll ever look at this again. But I'm glad that there was something always that stopped me from turfing it and holding on to that little spark of an idea. So I would say, don't throw anything away, and just stick with your convictions, and know that sometimes if you're not able to write a particular piece, maybe you're just not ready for that piece. So don't force it, because when you are ready, oh boy, the words will flow when you're ready. So just be patient with yourself and be good to yourself. I would suppose patience, and don't give up, and waiting for the right time. And it's never too late. So those would be some of my thoughts.
That's a really good way of giving people perspective and realizing. I love the fact that it's never too late. I think sometimes we get lost and think time has passed us by. What should I do? So I love that one. So,
Mhm.
Madam, where can our listeners find you? Where they can learn more about the books, where they can get a copy? Tell us.
Okay, so probably the easiest way is to go to my website, which is angelavanbreemen.ca. So that's spelled Angela, V like Victor, A like Apple, N like Norman, B like Bob, R double E, M like Mary, E like Edward, N like Norman.ca. So angelavanbreemen.ca. And from there, you can find the various links to online stores. If you live locally in Ontario, I can make arrangements to get the book to you in a signed copy. Otherwise, I think Amazon is probably one of the easiest ways to go, but it's available at Barnes and Nobles. There are a variety of different avenues where you can obtain the book for sure.
I love it. Awesome, Madam. So before you leave us, are you ready for the lightning round?
Sure.
Super easy. Don't think too much about this. Easy peasy. So here we go. Sodas or juice?
Juice.
Okay. Cake or muffins?
Well, muffins.
Beach or lake?
Oh, the lake.
Me too. Summer or winter?
Summer.
That's because you're in Canada. Us people in Texas are dying. We're like, oh,
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, but I have to have summer.
awesome. Last one, a little different. One word that best describes you.
Empathy.
It's a very, very good one. So, Miss Angela, do you have any closing remarks for us?
Well, it was a real delight to have the opportunity to talk about my book on your show, and it's been a delightful interview. So I really appreciate the time, and I hope that everyone enjoyed my reading. And if you like it, then please, please, please buy my book.
It was a pleasure having you. Absolutely a lovely delight. Love the reading. You did amazing. So, yes,
Thank you.
Or listeners, go ahead and check out Miss Angela, check out the website, look at the book, see if you're interested. You're going to have a blast with these characters and this premise. Is going to keep you turning the pages. And remember, we'll be back next week with another fabulous authors. Bye, everyone.